Welcome to the second hour of Mindshifters Radio, and today is June the 25th, 2025. And welcome, Susan. Welcome, Dr. Michael Ryce.
Thank you, dear heart, and welcome everybody. Delighted that you're here, Miss Susan, and that we get to have this conversation, continue this conversation as the world turns. And what I'd like to do, and would actually prefer for a few more people to come in before we start the conversation so they have the root of it. So, Miss Susan, I wonder if you would share. I'm going to go back and talk about what we talked about in our meeting this morning, but I wonder if you have any thoughts to share from that interaction.
I thought it was a most amazing meeting.
What struck you? What opened for you?
Everybody's sort of facing in the same direction, and the idea of critical mass, I just did a cutout, which is crazy, but I just had all this energy. So I'll send it to you when I'm finished.
Oh, please do.
It's neither here nor there. But anyway, I loved what John said and how it dovetailed with what you said. He's an amazing guy. Everybody was
Yes
on the same question, and what you came in to present, that was just right. You know, I thought we'd get lost in a lot of stuff, and we didn't. It was just good. So Tim came away saying, "Wow, that was amazing." So,
well, it's clear that John has tapped in, and I mean the fact that he's talking about stress and canceling, and although he doesn't hit on the note of canceling goals, he cancels things. I mean the whole conversation is parallel, and it's awesome to have the two perspectives that I think just open layer upon layer upon layer.
Right.
So it was very cool, and holding the space that we're getting close to critical mass. Go ahead.
No, Ockman is coming in. Hang on, I'll mute myself. Everybody's late coming in today.
Yes, they are. So, any thoughts for you, sweetie? Anything on your mind for today?
No, I've been gardening so much this morning. I haven't really had my mind on anything except doing that. And we've got a couple more people coming in. Hello,
Yeah,
Kathy.
getting that garden
Hello,
going.
Kathy. Welcome.
Welcome. Delighted you're here. And we just had a brief conversation with Susan. Susan does a weekly Mind Shifters group on Wednesday mornings at 10:30 Eastern Time. And she's been doing that now for a couple of years. And we had a conversation about critical mass and what's going on in the world. So I thought I might address some of that. And glad to have you here. And before I address that, before I go into that, open the space for anyone who has a conversation, anything to share, anything going on in your world that you need support with, questions, thoughts, answers, ideas, any awesome revelation that you'd like to share with us?
I have a question, Michael.
Please go for it.
So in my mind, when somebody says they have forgiven something, but they still want to hold somebody accountable, that seems like it's not been healed and it's like a punishment. Like, how does one hold somebody accountable without it? Do you know what I mean? Like, it feels like that's not healed then. That's not, one
Yeah,
hasn't
if one is
forgiven
still
it.
looking to punish, then obviously forgiveness hasn't occurred.
And does that have that implication, or is this just me that holding somebody accountable? I mean, like, there's things, right? Like, if you're not going to be in a relationship with somebody anymore, holding them accountable looks like leaving that relationship, right?
Right.
Or maybe because it's not good for you. But there's like certain things, like things that happened in the past, and somebody's saying, but I'm holding you accountable. Is there another way for me to look at that?
Well, here's my best information on that and where I learned the lesson. You know, the origin of Laws of Living, the course that I co-authored with Dan McDougald,
Right.
was requested by a Superior Court judge in Albany, Georgia, named Judge Kelly.
Mm-hmm.
Judge Kelly had been the head of the whole prison system in Georgia and then was appointed a Superior Court judge. And in his years on the bench, Kelly put a lot of people in prison for life many
Right.
times, but never punished one of them. Never had a thought of punishment. In fact, he would say to those before him, I mean, he would literally explain, you know, the people of your community have taken up a collection and built a building with bars around it for those who aren't safe in the community. And they asked me to decide who's safe and who's not safe. And
Right.
love you like a brother, but you're not safe in this community, so I'm going to sentence you to life in prison. At the same time, if you would like to heal, I'll sentence you also to laws of living. I mean, he would literally sentence people to laws of living. That was part
Right.
of their process. So he held them accountable for their behavior. You're a danger to the community, so I'm going to put you behind bars. But there was no energy of punishment. There was energy of compassion and the offering of, here, I'll even help you heal. I'll help you deal with your life by sentencing you to laws of living. There was a pretrial release program that we were part of. And in some cases, he would, if someone was quite a danger to the community, he would sentence them to laws of living, but while they were still in prison. Others, he had a pretrial release program where they signed a contract with him as the judge, and at any moment he could go. You know, he was, as part of their pretrial release, they would sign an agreement that he had, I mean, quite literally, total control over their lives. You know, let's say this person was a drug addict or an alcoholic. Part of the contract was, I can come and take a drug test, or I can have, you know, appoint an officer to come and take a drug test or an alcohol test anytime, day or night. I can come to your home and you will comply. That's part of what you're agreeing to if you're going to do this pretrial release. And laws of living, they're going to do a report. That's, you know, we use the personal code evaluation. It was specifically originally designed for determining, you know, things like hostility and fear and honoring others, honoring self, honoring truth. All of those things are indicators of whether someone's going to tend to engage in criminal behavior again or not. And so he would start out, and the first thing that would be done is they do the personal code evaluation. And if the personal code evaluation showed that they were likely to damage others or themselves, they'd go to jail while they did laws of living. And we would periodically do another evaluation with that person. And if the scores changed in such a way that the indicators were, okay, this person's now on the right track, like, you know, they maybe started out and on a scale of 100, they're honoring others. You know, they had, you know, maybe really beat somebody up or damaged someone, harmed them. And their evaluation score showed they're honoring others, you know, on a scale of 1 to 100 was maybe 10. And 3 months later, I mean, that person would go to jail. 3 months later, we do another evaluation. They're doing laws of living, and the score on honoring others was 90. He'd let that guy out of jail or that gal out of jail. Say, okay, we're going to write a new contract. You can continue to do the laws of living. And, at the end of the course, I'll determine if you fulfill everything. And then he would usually, if I remember correctly, I believe it was 3 years. If you complete this course and your scores are where I want them to be, i.e. you've shown that you're really making some changes, then I will free you of the rest of your prison sentence. If they're not, then you're back in jail. So he held them accountable, but there was no energy or thought of punishment. So yeah, we live in a world where I think we all need to be accountable for what we do. And so
yeah, well, no,
am I doing
totally
it? Am I doing it from Rockman? Am I doing it from a space of love, or am I doing it from hostility or fear?
right. Like I totally get that with the legal system, but to me, so let's say, so before Mark died, I found out that he cheated on me once.
Right.
Um, and I told him to leave. And then 2 days later,
Was that punishment or accountability?
I think that was, I needed space that would, I'm not sure that it may have been punishment, but 2 days later, I was like, well, I'm not going to divorce you for this. So you may as well come home. It
So it
was,
sounded like maybe you shifted from punishment to accountability, because I assume that there was significant conversation and some work done around what the circumstance was.
yeah, I mean, I was actually very relieved and felt very validated because I always felt like there was something and he just kept denying it.
Right.
So holding, I don't see, so like I forgave that and
Now, let's make sure we're talking the same language here. So that, whatever that was, can't be forgiven. I
right,
can pardon that behavior, and let's say that behavior brought up sadness, grief, rage, whatever it did in me. I would apply forgiveness to what came up in me and forgive as to what came up in me based on that situation. That would be the
right,
application of forgiveness. The other one would be pardoning.
right, right. But that's what I mean. Like any pain or anything I had dealt with, and it was no longer emotionally charged when I thought about it happening.
Right.
So I didn't, I mean, to me, like holding him accountable might look like if you do it again, then we're done.
Well, my offering would be that offering, if you're holding, to me, that would not be accountability. That would be a threat. I'm going to hang this sword of
Okay.
Damocles over your head, and that's how I'm going to control you. Accountability in that situation to me would look like, there are obviously some issues going on in our relationship, so we're going to make a commitment. What I want in order for us to move forward in this relationship, what I'd like to do is that each of us chooses to do our own work. Maybe we select a therapist, mutually agreeable therapist, and do some therapy together. Maybe we're both aware of the forgiveness process. Maybe we sit with each other, twice a week and do worksheets together specifically around this issue and do some responsibility communication and process through it. That would be holding him accountable, as well as, we're never independent from what happens in our lives. So it would be
Right.
holding me, if I were the person who was cheated on, it would be holding me accountable too. I want to look for the part of me that says I don't deserve, total, complete 100% commitment in my life. So there'd be
Right.
accountability for me in that situation too. So to me, that's how that would look.
Okay. Because the way it's being presented from this person is it just sounds like punishment. And what you said makes perfect sense. There's that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, a lot of times people will talk about justice. Well, I just want justice. my take is, at least when I hear it, you hear somebody in an interview on TV, or they're out there protesting for justice. The person who's talking about justice there is not looking for justice at all. What they're looking for is vengeance.
Yeah.
We need for, this person who was harmed, and we need for them to have justice. Well, what does that mean? Well, with the other person, the person that did it needs to be harmed too. That's not justice, that's vengeance. But
that's what, yeah.
The scriptural quote in there it doesn't come through the Greek translation of the Beatitudes, but one of the Beatitudes speaks of just and fair behavior between people.
Mm-hmm.
So when there's just and fair behavior between people, then we have justice. But most people use the word totally and completely and errantly and use it for something totally differently. Back a few weeks ago, Jeanie and Ari were in the car, and Jeanie shared this with me afterward. I wasn't there, but they came up to an intersection where there's a yield sign, and so I forget the exact details, but somebody in the intersection let somebody else go, and then they went, and then Jeanie pulled up and let somebody else go, and so Aria asked, "What's this about? What's happening here?" And Jeanie said, "Well, it's just so that each person gets a turn." And Aria's response is, "Oh, you mean they're just being fair with each other?" It's like, yeah, fairness.
Yeah.
That it's sick. She's got the idea of fairness. And
right.
To me, that we're just and fair with each other changes the whole game when we do that.
Yeah. So I was asked by somebody how that would work. And for me, like I told you, it was, well, if you heal it in yourself, then there's not going to be that need for punishment or whatever.
Yeah, punishment always comes from hostility. And hostility is a drug that covers pain. So if somebody does a behavior that resonates my pain, and I want vengeance on them with my hostility, it's because I haven't resolved my pain yet. When I go in and do the work of cleaning up my pain, my hostility will disappear. And chances are, when I do that healing work, I'm going to look at that person with compassion, and it's going to be a whole different game. It's going to be, again, we're going to move back to functioning from being and out of just and fair behavior rather than out of ego states of competition and, winning, losing, all of those sorts of dynamics.
Right. That'll help me be able to explain it better to her, because it just, my mind was just saying that's punishment. So
I hear you.
That's very helpful so this is how, if you're going to choose to stay in the relationship, that what accountability looks like.
Yeah, we've got some work to do. Let's join in doing our work. Let's really create a relationship based in just and fair behavior toward people. And part of that means that we keep our commitments.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much.
Cool. All right. Delighted.
All right.
Maybe see if anyone else has any thoughts. Anyone that's listening, does that conversation about accountability resonate for anyone? I know that's a big issue in the culture. A lot of times people are, how do we hold somebody accountable? So it's a good conversation piece to open. Anyone have any thoughts in that regard?
I do.
Yeah, sweetie, go.
When I was 16 to 19 years old, my first husband physically and emotionally abused me for those 3 years until I was finally brave enough to get out of it. And I never held him accountable, but I did a lot of forgiveness work. At first, I just ignored it for like 40 years. Like, I don't have to face him anymore. I don't have to deal with this.
At first,
for
the first 40 years.
For the first 40 years. And then when I started doing this work, I started doing a lot of work around that. And actually, even in writing my book, I processed through a whole lot of what I took on and thoughts that I thought about myself based on that experience. So I've done the forgiveness work around him, to the point that, I mean, I could actually run into him on the street and not want to kill him. And so I know that's
Big healing.
negative. So I might want to look at
No, that's
wanting to kill
pretty
him.
big healing. Yeah.
But, you know, for a long time, if I had run into him, I probably would have done something crazy. But, you know, it's like I've done the forgiveness work around it. I never held him accountable for it, and I don't plan to. Now, publishing my book when it comes out, um, you know, if he ever heard of it or whatever, it would create a space where he would have to face what he did. However, you know, that's the purpose of the book, was for my healing and not necessarily, you know, for anything for him. And
Right.
so I'm not holding him accountable, and that's my choice. But I have done a lot of forgiveness work about, you know, what it brought up in me, what I thought about myself, you know, how did I even get into that situation? And so holding someone accountable is not a requirement. Now,
Good point.
I pardoned him, you know, as far as like, you know, holding on to the grudge and the hate and the anger and the fear and all of those things. He probably doesn't even know if I'm still alive. And so it doesn't bother him, but it sure would impact me physically, mentally, and emotionally. So I choose to, you know, let that go, you know, pardon him for his ignorance. You know, who knows where that came from in him. But the forgiveness work is
Well, he was
in,
brought up with a lot of hellfire and damnation, right?
yes, he was. And I think part of it was, I don't even know how to word it. Like, he was under his mother's control constantly. And maybe it was like a breakout, for lack of another word, for him to, you know, get back at another female.
Right.
You know, I have no idea what was in his brain that would cause him to treat his new young bride the way that he did.
Yep.
But the forgiveness work was going inside and removing what it triggered in me, and the put down I did on myself for, I mean, even the divorce. You know, I was the first person in my entire family that ever got a divorce. So I had to deal with a lot of, you know, oh my gosh, I'm a terrible person, you know. But so there, I think there's a big difference in the forgiveness, which is within, pardoning the other person, let them off the hook for what they did if you choose, or you don't have to. And you can, or you can choose not to hold them accountable. But the forgiveness work is the most important piece, and that's your internal, and that has nothing to do with the other person.
Good point, Sweetie. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's exactly how I see it, Jeannie, and working with somebody that keeps saying, but I have to hold them accountable. And it's like, that just, we can't force people to heal, you know, so accountability might look like, I don't know.
Actually, it would look like a punishment, because, you know, like I could have, if I had known and had a different mindset back then, I could have held him accountable and had him arrested for um, physical, mental, emotional abuse.
Right.
And, you know, but I didn't do that. And so much time has gone by, you know, what would be the use now?
Right. And yeah, so I'm trying to grasp how to explain to
Well,
her that
maybe when this
because
recording
she
gets
won't,
posted, you know, if you would feel comfortable, have her listen to it and
right.
hear our examples, you know, and our input on it. And perhaps she would hear it a different way, not coming directly from you.
And
Yeah.
also not knowing what the circumstance is, but let's say, pardon me, it was a circumstance like Jeanie described, if it was someone today, that holding that person legally accountable for what they've done to protect others might be an integritous thing to do.
Right.
I mean, there was literal criminal behavior involved. And if there's criminal behavior involved, the most loving thing to do might be to pick up the phone and file a report with the police. That might be what love would do. Now, it also might be what hate would do. The difference is what's the state I'm coming from in taking forward any form of accountability.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's all I can do is try that and see what happens, because it really feels like punishment when I listen to it.
So then
it's like, I don't want to it's like she doesn't want to get out of the relationship, but she wants to hold him accountable. And that just.
So what I'd be doing is steering her into, offering the feedback. So what I hear you calling accountability sounds more like punishment, which means that perhaps there's still some hostility left in you. So I'd suggest before you do any action in regard to him, that you work through and forgive as to your hostility so that you have a clear mind connected to love. And if this is punishment, then you're able to let it go. If it is accountability and it's a reasonable thing to do, then go ahead and do whatever accountability looks like.
And I did that. And she's just very adamant, no, I can't do that. I don't have to let him off the hook. And it's like,
well, that's true. She doesn't have to let him off the hook. That's a totally separate issue.
Right. I just know that for me, when I heal myself and do my work, then I don't have that need to hold somebody accountable. Like,
right.
And maybe if the situation was different and it was illegal stuff, that might look differently. Like you said, if it's coming from a place of love, like, hey, I feel like I need to do something about this to protect the public or to protect whoever.
Right.
Then that would be completely different.
Different situation, right?
Yeah.
Well, we'll hold the space that you're guided to
Thank you
provide
for sharing,
just
Jeanie.
input.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm still kind of grappling with it, but I'll try that and see if that works. And thank you so much for sharing, Jeanie.
You're welcome and deserving.
Bye.
And it's a big topic, big conversation. So does anyone else have any input?
Yeah, this is Susan here. Susan.
Go for it.
I'm thinking about my little sister and Jeanie, what you said about not having to hold a person accountable. I've had the fact that my sister molested my son for about 4 years when he was a little boy. She would babysit for us in exchange for us paying her rent, and she was in a tough. She made some bad choices in her life, and anyway, we tried to help out by paying her rent in exchange for babysitting or helping herd choir kids in our opera company or whatever. She was very helpful. But my son only about a year ago or 2 years ago told me that he had been molested by her for several years. He had a name for her. He called her the penis inspector. What she wanted to do was check on his development. That was the excuse she used to have him take down his trousers when he was 4 and 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. And none of this has ever been brought up to her. And I've asked Jonathan, do you want to confront her? He says, no, I don't want to interact with her in that way. I'll just put it aside and we'll carry on because it's not happening anymore. And I seem to be okay. And I'm not sure this hasn't contributed to his depression or anxiety or whatever has been going on with him. How do you know? But I have felt I ought to hold her accountable, and I haven't wanted to. And I don't know what that's about. I think if I did, she would just say, what are you talking about? I would never do a thing like that. And she is a good liar. It's also occurred to me that my son might have made that up, but I don't think so. Anyway, there's a lot of unfinished garbage in there, but to have the accountability issue taken off the table because it's okay not to hold someone accountable. I feel as if the rocks have shifted a little bit somehow. Anybody there?
Yes, I'm listening.
Okay.
Excuse me, I had been talking away, but I had my mute button pushed. My
Oh,
apology.
okay.
I was saying that, I can certainly understand that as a mom, it would be pretty disturbing to hear that your sister has had that kind of interaction with your son as a young boy. And at this point, the question I would invite you to ask yourself, is it really accountability that you want? Or is there part of your mind that wants to get even?
I'm sure
Vengeance here.
that's in there. It's like working on my mother issue, which still is in limbo after all the mind shifters and so forth. I feel as if in every way intellectually I've forgiven them both. I see why my mother did what she did to her children and why my sister did what she did, partly because my mother had done things to her, not molesting, but punishing. You know all about that.
Right.
And it's late in life. My sister's in very poor health, fragile, very weak, losing weight, difficulty walking. I'm taking her for a surgery, probably minor, I don't know what it is, parathyroid surgery in a couple of weeks. I'm to drive her there and pick her up and take her home. She's hardly eating, she's drinking Ensure, this, you know what that is. It's a liquid protein drink to keep people proteinated, or whatever it is. On the other hand, she's like the cat of nine lives. She's about to turn 79 years old. I think it's miraculous that she has lived as long as she has. She's had 2 suicide attempts, been on disability since she was about 42 years old because of asthma, because she keeps cats stubbornly and she's massively allergic to cats. So she's in the hospital every once in a while to detox. It's just endless. And I just I don't want to I don't want to stir that pot. We're in a holding pattern and I don't know what it means to not do anything about it, but I'm not doing anything about it. The whole situation.
Right. Well, I presume that at this late stage in her life, that having the conversation with the idea of holding her accountable would be pretty much redundant. Or maybe redundant isn't the word, it'd be pretty much useless. Like, what would
I've
it
wondered about
accomplish?
that. One of the things about doing the work with you is I feel as if there's the possibility of all the pipes being wide open and everything being like critical mass. We're able to take the deep breath that we've been holding all our lives. I feel as if maybe if I do this, then, and that may be an illusion too, maybe we just have to live with some things unresolved or unfinished or no closure in that department. And I asked myself, am I just a chicken? Because the idea of confronting her is very scary and unpleasant. So,
Well, remember that you can confront her without having to have her present. That you could, in terms of what you need to resolve within you, you could sit her in a chair in your mind's eye,
yeah,
and have that conversation with her.
I could do that.
And that would, I think, open the space for some closure within you. I can't imagine at 79 that even opening it, I can only imagine that the guilt, if in fact, as you say, you're not sure, did he make it up? It sounds pretty specific.
Oh, yeah.
Doesn't sound like a made up sort of thing, but what would it accomplish? What could you possibly accomplish by confronting her except to make her, or let her know, and make her feel guilty? But in terms of the internal resolution, you could sit her mentally in a chair, have the conversation with her, and let her know what your intentions are and what you want to do in order to clear that out. And then you remember that exercise that we do where you imagine the two pencil tips of light, one coming in through the front of the center of the forehead and the one through the top, centering yourself there and releasing all attachment to her in regard to this issue. I think that would be a way for you to have closure, aside from maybe doing a worksheet or two around it, have closure with her around that without having to open a wound that probably would do nothing but fester even more.
That's good to hear. It's amazing how much physical energy is being released in me just hearing you talk about it, or me talk about it, or us talking about it.
Yeah, I would sit her in a chair in your mind's eye and say everything that has ever come to your mind about this. And some of it might not be very nice and might not be very loving. And I think letting that all just open up, sort of using it like a mind shifter to open whatever's in there. And I could imagine that, if that were my child, I could imagine some pretty deep rage and maybe more to let that open so that you finish with it and you get closure.
Okay.
Because that's not a wound you need to carry around any longer. You have a thought, Celinda?
Yes. Oh, man, to what you just said, Michael. And I really liked what you said about confronting within our own minds and using that as a mind shifter. And I have a couple more thoughts, Susan, which may or may not be possible or help for you. But I keep going back to what Dr. Tim talks about when he first discovered Rilke, and it took him 2 or 3 years before he even could consider the possibility of the sanity of what Rilke was saying when he said to learn to live in the question rather than demanding the answer. And there's a possibility, and also where Rilke said, perhaps I will live into the answer. In other words, there was that open, what seems to me that open possibility that the issue would not be resolved at all. And I was thinking of myself as a fixer, because I would do exactly what you want, or what you're thinking about and feeling. Oh, I'm just going to go fix this situation. I'm going to hold this person accountable. And I just laugh at myself, because I'm still a fixer, but I'm catching myself earlier and earlier. And the last thing I would love to share, and you can just trash can anything that doesn't resonate for you, is the accountability now, other than what Michael was saying about making peace within your own mind for yourself. The accountability now would seem to me to belong to Jonathan, not you, because he is an adult and he's making a choice, and he may make choices that do not bring him peace, but that's Jonathan's work, not yours. And that's what I'm trying to learn with my relationship with Larry. What's my work with him, and what's not my work with him? And so I'm having just as many struggles as you are, and yet I'm learning to live in the question, like Dr. Tim says, and like you say, Michael, of breathing and being gentle with yourself, and living in the question and asking to be shown, and being within yourself by doing your own work to come to a place that you're no longer needing the outcome, the resolution to be, because you don't have a demand for it anymore. And if it happens, it'll happen through grace and through your work with yourself and Jonathan's work with himself, and the way will open. That's my blessing for you and for all of us and for me. And I hope there's some truth in that and some help in that. But if not, just you know where the trash can is. You know where to file it.
Thanks.
Blessing.
Thanks, Celinda.
And I'm complete. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. You know, there are certain religious traditions that have a confessor, and there's a powerful place for having a confessor, for sure. And I think that, you know, setting her in a chair and speaking, yelling, whatever it looks like, whatever's there to come up to open, could have the same impact of just opening and freeing you of this wound that, you know, was it 40 years ago? Carrying around, it's a long time to hold.
Yeah, I've only known about it for a couple of years, but maybe for Jonathan, you mean, yeah, 50, well, 45, yeah, whatever it is.
So holding the space with you.
Thanks. Very weird. It's somehow not unlike where I am with my mother.
How so?
Well, I'm not even sure, except that the way I would know that everything was changed to healthy would be if I could feel comfortable in myself showing certain kinds of affection or expressing myself in certain ways that were not done in my family, so that our emotional spectrum was quite small in my family. Rage or clownish happiness and delight and giddiness. Learning the full spectrum of emotions within my family is still not going to happen. Sometimes with friends, or like on the radio show, in spite of myself, sometimes those feelings would show, but to have them be in my fluent vocabulary, emotional spectrum. That's one reason, Jeanie, I've always adored you for being able to cry about something. I've said this before, I think. The fact that you can just bawl over something is so, I admire that so much because it is so not done in my family. So if I could do that, I'd figure I had somehow healed my mother and me together from whatever happened when we were little kids in the household. And in every intellectual way, I've forgiven my mother and I took good care of her and I enjoyed her company at the end of her life. And we had such a good time. But that door is still shut.
Well, once again, perhaps it's time to sit down beside her and have the conversation.
That I could do. It's funny, the idea of I could do that. I could do that. Yeah, it's a good idea.
And on the inner realm, especially with your mom, I mean, really, literally, energetically asking her to be present with you as you do that
Mm-hmm.
may call her solely in to really be there to interact with you and receive that. Clean it up.
That's a scary idea. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So are you willing to recognize it? It's just an idea. Ideas aren't scary, but perhaps this one brings up some fear that would be the next worksheet
Mm-hmm.
that you might want to do to open the space to energetically really clean this up with your mom, that you can free yourself totally and completely of every energy involved in that quality of interaction between you two.
Mm-hmm. It's so tied into all this addictive attachment crap that I've been doing for years and years in my life, getting inordinately attached to someone in order to get it right this time. Holy mackerel, it's all connected. Anyway, thanks for the idea. Good.
And it might be time to cancel the need to get it right and let yourself do what most deeply you're inclined to do, and label that as right. Allow that at this stage to be the right thing for you to do.
I don't even know what you're talking about, Michael.
Well, again, it would tie in with the idea of sitting down, with your sister. I suggested a chair, but with your mom, the fact you took care of her the latter years of your life, it might be more personal to just sit beside the bed with her. Maybe you still have the bed she was in, even, and ask for safety and to have the deep-seated physiological fear released from your body. Where is that fear stored? Is it in your gut? Is it in your buttocks? Is it in your feet?
In my chest.
In your chest? And to talk to her about that. Maybe even question her on what was going on for her that she would do those behaviors with you.
Oh, I've had that discussion. We've had that discussion. Yeah, I somehow haven't finished the work, but yeah.
So notice where your physiology's tight.
And
that's where I'd allow my breath to go, and wherever you feel it, if it's a particular part of your chest, imagine as you breathe that instead of taking the air in through your mouth or your nose, that you're actually taking the air in through that place that's tight.
Oh,
And let
okay.
that tightness respond by opening it. Let yourself consciously, purposely open that part of your physiology.
You know, I watched that movie. I can only imagine. And you just said that. You just said that phrase, I can only imagine. I had a very powerful reaction with that. First of all, I thought to say, Michael, you didn't tell us this is an evangelical Christian movie. This is why didn't you tell us that? And I could send that movie to my grandson, who's proselytizing all over the place to get me saved. That's beside the point.
Right.
All I could think is, well, it was easy for him. Somehow there was a pathway open between him and his dad, and then they could just blast their way through it. Bully for them, you know.
Yeah, yours is pretty much unilateral, isn't it?
How do you mean?
Well, in that film, he had his father, and they were able to work through it. You know, his dad
Yeah.
did his
Yeah.
share of releasing, which was really the thing that opened the space for him to be able to do that as well. Where, you know, mom's not here to do that, so it's unilateral. This is all going to have to come from within you.
Yeah. But you just told me something that's true. If she were alive, she would be willing to do this, just the way the dad was. That's a new thought. She would be willing. She was willing. I wasn't willing.
Well, and notice in the film, you know, he's sitting with his dad, and his dad's doing his best. He's done some healing. He's doing his best to open the space, and his son gets up in a rage and leaves. Goes to
But
get on
then
his
he can't
motorcycle,
leave.
it won't start. You can't leave because the motorcycle won't start. And then he's confronted with a crisis. And that's what, you know, really gets him to change to shift and to start to take some responsibility, and rather than walking off in the huff and carrying on the rest of his life with his rage. So I would think that perhaps just realizing, I mean, that's a pretty generous gift to give your mom, to allow that she would be willing to do that with you. That's a pretty generous acknowledgement of her. And if I were you, I'd take it further too. Yeah, and we will create this conversation that alleviates this, that I'm safe enough to let every little bit of hurt and grief and sadness and rage, whatever it is, to let it out of my tissue structure so that I'm free of it.
Both doing accountability, isn't it?
Yeah.
My mom would be willing, but my sister, I don't think, would be. Okay.
Well, again, I think the circumstance being what it is with your sister, that unless something were there to open the conversation, really, what would be the use?
Yeah.
But mom's a different circumstance, being personal with you.
Yeah. And she did let me know before she died. Twice. I can think of 2 times when she was knocking on my door and I would not open it.
I remember how that goes.
Do you?
Yep. I did that with my dad,
How'd you do it?
the early days.
How did you do it?
There came a point, you know, I worked one summer. He ran a mill, in a steel mill in a factory. And I worked in that factory. And up to that point, you know, there was just primarily abuse toward me, abuse and degradation. But when the reports came in from all the students, and they hired hundreds of students, he shared with me that my report was from, the foremen and the bosses around that, you worked in different parts of the yard and different parts of the factory, that my performance was one of the best of all of the young people. They had a policy of hiring the children of their workers.
Right.
That the report was one of the best of all the students that was in, and all of a sudden it was a shift toward me. And the place where it manifested was prior to that, and him telling me about that. Like, I could not touch his car. And shortly after that, it was like, here are the keys, go ahead. And I just was like, I wasn't home for that. I won't use the language that I used under my breath toward him at that point on the radio show, but it was not very kind. So I hear you loud and clear.
Wow. And it came in a roundabout way by an affirmation from the outside that your dad could trust, that he knew you were the good guy, that he wasn't giving you credit for being.
Yeah.
Wow. How long did it take before you came around and accepted the keys?
I never did.
You never did in your life,
Mm-mm.
in his lifetime?
No.
So you've done it afterwards. Post-mortem rehab, Michael.
Well, it was I started the rehab work in that regard, while he was still alive. But, for me, the real completion of the process of healing with him really didn't happen until probably about a year ago in a still point session.
Really? Really?
Yeah.
Really? Really?
I mean, there were several levels. The early days, the first piece of work that I did when I started doing this work was around that whole issue and with him. So that's 50 years ago. But to come to the point where I felt, and like in every cell of my being, was able to embrace him as fully as I embraced my granddaughter. That's the energy that came in, was really just being able to embrace him in that completely. And that just happened about, I don't know, it's a year ago, or maybe a little more than a year ago. There were several stages, and I mean, when I did the original work, we became friends. We became, our relationship improved tremendously while he was still alive. And we were able to have, decent conversations and, fun, quote unquote. But that deepest part of the wound that would have inhibited me from embracing him that fully, that really completed just about a year ago for me.
Wow, that is so encouraging.
So I'd support you being able to come to that point with your mom, because what I'm really clear about was that whole thing was all about me. I mean, he was brutal, he was abusive, there's all that truth and all that story that I could talk about, holding him accountable for, but the trauma inside of me that kept the wall up between he and I was mine.
Right. It is. I feel it totally.
I mean, I can remember the words that went through my head, and again, I won't repeat them on the show. When he said, "Here, go ahead, take the car."
Yeah,
It's
I
like,
can hear him. I
just was not home. It's like, too
I
late,
can
buddy.
only imagine.
Too late. Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. So joining you in holding my dad and your mom in a blessing.
What's your dad's name?
And Michael.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much.
Joining in that space of of being able to soften within us, all of us, with our own hearts, that we can ultimately embrace ourselves in that complete space of love.
That's it. That's it.
That's it. That's who we're designed for.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right. You have a blessed one. Breathing with you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Lots of love and blessings. Take care. Bye-bye.